Welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Dozer, and if you're new to the show, the mission here is to expose the quacks and gimmicks in the marketing industry while featuring some great marketers and entrepreneurs along the way. On this episode, I'm really excited to have on Matt Walz. Now, Matt is the founder and CEO of the Jenny Project, which is an AI startup we'll dive into later, and also the former head of predictive intelligence at General Mills. So, Matt, thank you so much for joining the show.
Yeah, happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so just for some full disclosure, really interesting how we met. I was actually on my honeymoon and I ran into Matt in La Crosse, Wisconsin. He was talking about AI startups. I was like, well, that's really interesting because I got an AI YouTube channel. I'm well versed in AI. I could have stayed there a whole nother week chatting with you about AI for sure.
Yeah, it was a fortunate run-in, I would say. It was a good conversation, a lot of fun. I don't talk to, I mean, I've got a very narrow space of people who are very, very interested in AI, and it tends to, when I go outside that bubble, like nobody talks about it. So
Yeah.
it's very
Every
good,
time
good
I
run.
talk to someone, they're like, "Who's Claude?" Right? They don't even know what Claude is,
Yeah.
So cool. So sounds like you had a really good gig at General Mills, right? So first, I want to talk to you about what kind of inspired the jump to entrepreneurship. I guess what advice would you give to someone who's on that fence or considering what you did?
Yeah. So I'll start by saying that. So I've got a group of data scientists, machine learning engineers that I interact with pretty regularly, and we talk about things like, are you a Woz or a Jobs, right? And what I mean by that, are you like a Steve Wozniak or a Steve Jobs? Where Woz is kind of behind the scenes, kind of building things, innovating and like producing good products. And Jobs is out there in front, like trying to actually set the direction of the company or, design the vision of innovation, which direction you want to pursue and things like that. And I've always considered myself in many ways a Woz, right? Where I've been behind the scenes. I always thought Jobs was that type of position was too difficult, right?
A lot of pressure, a
And
lot of stress.
absolutely, yeah. And I was very comfortable at General Mills, and there was a very clear path to growth if I wanted to continue to continue down that route, right? I had a pretty good understanding of how the game's played if I wanted to climb the corporate ladder, so to speak. But at this stage of my life, I don't necessarily view comfort as a good thing. And to me, what is life but a continual search for meaning and a call to adventure? And one of the most adventurous things I think you could do, really to push your limits and boundaries, is to go out and build something, on your own, right? And kind of test your value and test to see if people are interested or find value in what you do. Not to say that I did this on my own, right? There's plenty of help along the way, and as right, the willingness to kind of step into that void is a step towards adventure. So I've kind of pivoted myself to become more of a Jobs than a Woz in that sense.
Yeah, I really like that analogy. And when I was on the fence in corporate America of jumping, it really was the fear of failure. But I realized we over exaggerate failure because really, Matt, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? Oh no, we get another job in corporate America doing all the things that we learned, by the way, diving into entrepreneurship that very few people actually have that skill set.
Yeah, for sure. And it's even like if you think of it in terms of risk too, if you start like an entrepreneurial journey early enough and it's darts at a dartboard to some degree, right? You might miss a couple times, but eventually if you're persistent, what you do and you're hardworking, you do hit, right? The rewards there to make it all worthwhile to some degree.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
what would you say are some of the skills and lessons that you learned in your corporate career? Because I look at my experience in corporate America and there was definitely a lot of value when I was there. So, what would that be for you?
Yeah, tons of things I learned. Some things, that I wanted to take away and implement, and other things that I knew I wanted to avoid in the future. Many more things that I would take away and actually use, but like I would often find myself like in a meeting in corporate America thinking, what am I doing here? It'd be like one of those things where you get dragged into things. There's like no purpose to the view. You're required to attend the meeting, but it seems to be a waste of time. And one of my goals for the startup is to not have that feeling from anyone on the team, but to more or less kind of ruthlessly track and prioritize time, right? How our time spent. So I actually encourage everyone in the meeting to leave if they don't find the time valuable, and which either means, right, they shouldn't be in the room, or I haven't expressed well enough like why it is valuable for them to be there.
Or just use an
Um,
AI note taker and transcribe it and follow up later.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's the way we're headed. Yeah, but good things, right? So good takeaways that I had. I was granted a lot of autonomy in my role. I could really choose the projects and operate my team like I wanted to. So like I have to give a lot of praise to the people I reported to for setting up a structure like that. there's other things like, I learned the foundations behind like the agile mindset and how to implement it with Scrum. But I think one of the key takeaways that I had is, kind of caring for the people that you work with. So I come prior to General Mills, I come from academia, and it can be a little ruthless. You're pretty much on your own, right? You're fighting with others close to you for any scrap at the table. I really learned kind of, from a management perspective, it's like I'm here to help you, right? I learned kind of a management style very much in the vein of David Marquette, empowering people with autonomy, but also responsibility and accountability. And that's, I feel like, when people are willing to give their best, and that's probably one of the key things that I've carried over. But I mean, you've spent time in the corporate world too, right? So does any of that resonate with you?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even the structure of corporate America, I think, helped me, right? Because when you're an entrepreneur, if you've never had that structure, every day is like fight or flight mode, it seems like. So having that structure of, okay, in the morning, I'm going to do this. I have a meeting here, and having to like organize your calendar on a day to day basis and learn how to prioritize, I think that was the biggest thing for me, is
Mhm.
just establishing structure in my life.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, I get that, because you do have to, like, that's central for what we do in the startup world, right? Because if you're
Absolutely.
not,
So let's
yeah.
talk about your AI startup now, Matt. It's called the Jenny Project. Can you explain this, I guess, in layman's terms, and what's the main problem that you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so at the Jenny Project, we produce consumer feedback in a fast and affordable manner, helping insights professionals make confident, data-driven decisions and avoid guesswork, more or less. So we know that decision making is difficult, right? You can think of day-to-day decisions like, what are you going to have for dinner? Are you going to eat out? Are you going to, make something at home? If you eat out, what type of food are you going to do? Like those are tricky decisions that people don't
Hardest
even like to
decision of
make.
the day.
Yeah, yeah, and you can extrapolate that, right? Tenfold if you're somebody who's producing a brand or something like that, trying to get a brand out into the field, that could is crucial to business growth or something like that, right? Those decisions, are going to either the decisions you make could make or break that company to some ways. And if you don't have any like data to support your decision framework, it makes it that much more challenging. And we found that a lot of companies that conduct things like concept tests, right, branding choices and stuff like that, they make a lot of guesses on what will work and what won't work, and then they bring those concepts to survey panelists to test them out, right? But there's really no filtering prior to bringing it to those audiences, and it's expensive to do, right? So to get a to do a concept test with a panel of humans, can cost you thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars to do. And I'll give you an example of what all
Yeah, I
this
was
this
going to ask
could
you
look
about a
like.
real world example here soon,
Yeah.
but that to me reminds me that's like marketing too, right? There's all
Yep.
these people that come in and they're like, "Oh, I have this idea and that idea. I think it's going to work," but there's no actual data that's credible to back up any of these claims. So I agree with 100% with what you're saying. So I guess what separates the Jenny project from other AI startups that are trying to accomplish a similar mission?
Yeah, yeah. So I'll walk you through kind of what we do in that sense. Then I'll talk a little bit about how we differentiate ourselves from others. So if you think of like if you're a baked goods company or something like that, and you make cookies and other types of delectables, let's call them, and you've got this idea of a concept for a high fiber cookie, and you're like, this is a great concept, it's going to be awesome. And you put a tagline together, you give the cookie a name or something like that, right? And then you go and you bring it to those human panelists to see how they feel about it. Again, which is going to cost you thousands of dollars to do. But I think there's a step in this process where we're not very good at asking the right questions to actually get to the best answers. And what we're trying to do is like help these individuals who do things like this ask the right questions. And what I mean by that is, why a high fiber cookie? Why couldn't it be a low sugar cookie or a high protein cookie or a cookie with antioxidants or something like that, right? And so what we do is, so we will, let's call this cookie Sam's cookie that they're putting out there, and we'll give it a tagline, something like a traditional cookie with untraditional flavors. And so what we would do is we would bring that concept to 200 AI panelists. These are powered by large language models, and they've got different demographic backgrounds, different psychographic backgrounds, and they're nationally representative of the U.S. population. And we'll call one of these panelists, these AI panelists, Michael Garza. We'll just give him a name, right? And we'll say he's got a Mexican heritage. He is 40 years old. He's single. He's a data analyst making $70,000 a year, and so on and so forth. And we'll construct this virtual environment where we'll say, all right, Michael, you're shopping, at a grocery store. You're going down the baked goods aisle. you see Sam's cookie there, with this tagline, traditional cookie with untraditional flavors. Do you buy this cookie? And then we'll ask 199 other AI panelists the same question. And then what we would do, we'll record the responses, and maybe 20% say, yes, I'll buy this cookie. Then we'll erase their memories, do the exact same thing again. This time in the tagline, adjust it from traditional cookie with untraditional flavors to traditional cookie with untraditional flavors and high fiber. Just append that one thing to it, right? Everything else stays the same, ask the same question, and you see how they respond, right? And maybe in this situation, 19% say, yes, I'll buy the cookie. It's like, well, then maybe a high fiber cookie might not be the best idea. And then you keep testing, right? And you could do, maybe a cookie with antioxidants gets you up to like 27% or something like that. And it's like, well, maybe here's a concept we should go with. And now you have evidence to really support that concept, allowing you and your team to make better decisions along the way.
And that makes sense. I want to get a little technical here. So you said AI panelists, right? Powered by large language models. Let's talk about first what large language models are you using and also the data behind that, right? Because AI and large language models are only as good as the data that supports them on the back end. So talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, so we've tested out various different large language models, foundational large language models. We've stuck with right now we're using GPT-4o because it has performed the best, both in our research as well as academic research. And what I mean by best is it seems to replicate like actual human responses the best compared to other large language models. But to answer your question, like where's the data coming from and things like that, without getting away too much, right?
Right. Yeah. No
I'll give
trade
a
secrets.
couple.
Yeah.
I'll give a couple answers to that question. So again, we've identified a couple dozen demographics and psychographics that we combine into these personality profiles. We can create as many of these as we want, right? And again, we do it so based on nationally represented populations. We can create hundreds of thousands in seconds. They are powered right now by GPT-4o, but you can think of them in many ways as actors in a Hollywood movie, right? So have you seen the movie Oppenheimer by any chance?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So in that movie, Cillian Murphy plays, Robert Oppenheimer, right, the father of the atomic bomb. And to take on the role, he lost 25 pounds. He like read everything he could get his hands on that Oppenheimer wrote. He listened to all of his lectures. I think rumors have it he actually rehearsed in front of his dog Scout. We know we know that Cillian Murphy is not Robert Oppenheimer, but in the movie he behaves as if he is, right? And so that's really what we're trying to do with these large language models is we give them these, personality profiles, these character profiles, and they're trained on the corpus of the web, right? So they know all sorts of things about human behavior, and we act as a director and say, okay, here, go do this, behave like this, and then we'll extract your response. Like that's the simple base format that we do. There are additional things we can do with things
So
like
I think I understand in layman's terms, it's using these AI models like a GPT-4o and then applying your own data sets behind that. You're not 100% relying on OpenAI's data to get your answers.
yeah. So there's things like retrieval augmented generation that you can do where you can point towards a data set where it's like, okay, here's panels who've actually real panels of humans who've actually done this behavior, learn from that, and you can make decisions based off of that. A lot of
Got it.
testing shows that it's difficult though because you're introducing a level of bias when you do something like that. So it's not always obvious that that's the case that you want to go, but there are various ways to train these personas to act in different manners.
Have you tried using O1 or the Pro Mode or even DeepSeek? Have you heard of DeepSeek yet?
I haven't heard of DeepSeek. No, I'd be interested to hear more about that.
That's a new one that came out a couple weeks ago. So I know I got to try my best to stay up to date on all this LLM stuff. But why not like an OpenAI or O1 or an O3, right? That's the one that's apparently close to
Yeah.
AGI. Talk about why you haven't tested those yet, or maybe you have.
So we use those for various things, but part of the key to what we're doing is being able to do things rapidly. And O1, O3, they take time to respond because
And
they
cost
have that
efficiency
thinking.
probably too, right? Because those
Yeah,
models are more expensive to pull API calls from.
yeah, and because you've got that, it's quote unquote reasoning that they're doing behind the scenes, right? So it's going to more or less extrapolate probably the response time by somewhere between 30 to 40 fold if we were to use something like that. So we can give you like a panel of 500 respondents in about 10 minutes if we ask them any question that we want. But if you do that with something like O1, right, you're going to increase that response time above an hour. So there's potential there. We haven't tested out whether it's truly beneficial in terms of accuracy perspective. And I don't think I've seen any tests yet because it's so new at this point. But it likely will be something that we do in the future here.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I guess looking ahead, what are your, I guess, 3 to 5 year goals for the Jenny project? How do you hope it'll impact businesses and kind of make a name for yourself?
Yeah. So really Jenny right now is growing, right? So Jenny's our product, right? She interacts with a market researcher, gets feedback, and then she actually generates these other AI agents that, or she conducts this simulation that's ongoing, and we're teaching her to learn more and more things and to do more and more things, especially when we're getting more data from people as to what they're interested in. Oftentimes, there are things that she can't answer, and she will be able to answer in the future. Right now, we're very focused on market research, but really, Jenny is being built to help any decision-making process that you have. That's what we're going for. It helps in the 3 to 5 years, right? We're looking to help smaller companies, medium-sized companies that haven't been able to do insights because they're too expensive to actually be able to afford them now and more effectively compete with larger competitors with bigger budgets. For those larger companies, we're helping them ask better questions, like I mentioned before, right, to minimize some of that guesswork. And really for creatives, market researchers, consultants, ad agencies, and others like that, it's a tool that actually allows them to conduct market research prior to, say, pitching a client, right? So oftentimes they don't have the time or the money to go out and do market research prior to a pitch. And with us, right, they can bring evidence to the pitch meeting to actually bring that client on board.
So I was going to ask my next question. I said, let's say I'm a potential business wanting to sign up with what you're doing with the Jenny project. I guess what does that onboarding process look like, and who do you work with?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a few ways to go about it. So we're launching our Jenny base version, which is an AI agent. It's Jenny that you interact with. It's a simplified version, so it's just a question and answer type of response. So if you say, if you want to know something simple or obvious, like, what do people watch more, the NFL, the MLB, or the NBA, right? She can answer questions like that, and she's limited in terms of like the panel that she has. You can't change demographics and stuff. So we've got that base version, which you can sign up for, right? If you're kind of just a general researcher or you're a consultant or something like that, gives you that really quick feedback. Then we've got other versions where it gets a little bit more advanced, a little bit more customizable, where you can construct like custom audiences and things. And we've got like we can go to the point where it's fully customizable, where anything you want, we can more or less generate. Because the cool thing about these AI panelists is, oftentimes we can't test, like, so I'll give you an example. So say you're an airline, right? And you want to know what's the least amount of space I can give people to pack in the most amount of
That's
seats.
what
You
it
can't,
seems like they're doing, anyways, isn't it?
yeah, but it's like it's hard to do because you can't really do it with humans because there's a point where they're going to blow up on social media and be like, this is horrible, right? What they're doing here. You can do it with these panelists because they don't, there's no response to them. You just erase their memories and then you move on, something like that. So it's a lot of things that you can do that you can't do with human panelists is one of the directions we're going, in addition to that kind of like quick iterative feedback or monadic testing.
That makes sense. I guess you mentioned AI agents. That's the big buzzword now for
Mhm.
2025. So, just from a holistic viewpoint, how do you see AI agents impacting, I guess, both corporate America, just the business world in general in 2025? What can people look forward to or watch out for with AI agents?
Yeah, good question. I would say AI agents, it seems to me that they're likely going to get more and more personalized across time, and pretty much anything. So, right, helping you with finances, scheduling, budget, like all these things are going to be done by AI agents at some point in the future. I don't know if it will be 2025, but it will be here shortly, and
We'll
everybody's
see
going to
the
have.
first iterations, I think, but I don't think it'll be too advanced where it's going to replace half the workforce. I think it could replace some jobs for sure, the data entry, the receptionists, the people that pick up the phone
Mhm.
doing customer service. I could definitely see that, but on a huge scale of corporate America, I think we're still a few years away at least.
Yeah, yeah, it would surprise me. I mean, change is difficult, right? It'll take a while for these things to fully to fully take effect. I do think you're right in terms of the customer service and that type of route. I think that's like the obvious low-hanging fruit for something like this, and we're already seeing it with these LLM powered chatbots that you can interact with.
Have you seen Claude computer use?
No, I've not. No.
That came out last year at some point towards the end, but basically it's like this agent that controls your computer. You have to watch this video when we get off the
Hmm.
podcast here, but it controls your computer and it like did this data entry task and it was like hands off. The screen was moving, it took your cursor and was doing all this stuff. I'm like, holy moly. I was like, this is the first iteration of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I'll have to check that out. Yeah, I didn't. Yeah, never thought about something like that, but that makes sense in terms of data entry. Yeah, I do think a lot of like it's getting like these large language models are already really good at coding, right? And like error troubleshooting stuff like that. I know, so I've been coding for maybe 10 years, and you know, a prompt developer, somebody who's good at actually engineering prompts, can probably code better than I can, even if they have no coding experience. It's like
Yeah.
those
And I
things are
actually
going
have
to
a
happen.
YouTube video coming out soon about, prompt engineering, prompt hacking. There's no such thing as like a perfect prompt or prompt engineering,
Yeah,
but there's various tactics you can do, right? So you can come into Claude or Chat GPT and say, hey, create me an advanced prompt for this type of code. And it'll take that little sentence and create a one paragraph prompt that you can copy and paste in a new window, right? Little tactics like that where like I'm not a coder, I'm not technical, but I've started to use these LLMs enough where I know these little tips and tricks here and there.
yeah, yeah, that's smart. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we're already seeing like the origination of agents to some degree too, with like the Amazons, how they recommend products and things like that. So again, I do think like the agent route and just things being more and more personal to the point where you eventually you're going to have an assistant that's like you, right? A virtual assistant that basically is you, thinks like you, operates like you, and can do all the tasks that you don't necessarily want to do.
And I have a custom GPT that like mimics my writing style, but it's not autonomous, right? It's not
Yeah.
going in here and creating things every week like I want it to. Maybe it can do that. I'm just not technical enough to figure it out. I don't know, but that's what I want eventually. So, in addition to agents, Matt, I guess what are some other AI trends that you see happening in 2025
Yeah, agents would be key. Probably content creation is going to be one. Coke's been doing those things where they're actually creating ads and products with
with AI
AI.
video? Yeah.
So that's interesting. Really interesting to see how that expands. Hopefully, like, I mean, what's key to me would be if costs of model building go down, if we can keep cutting into those costs, so people can have their own, local neural nets trained, operating. I think Apple's trying to go in this direction, if they haven't already. But like that would be very fascinating if we could, with our own data, right, have our own like local neural net that's just operating all the time or operating all the time. That would be fascinating. Yet I don't think that'll be 2025, but hopefully we get closer to something like that.
Did you see Google's quantum computing chip called Willow last year?
Yeah, yeah,
What are your
that's
thoughts on
nuts.
that?
I don't fully understand. So quantum computing, like I don't fully understand what it is.
I
And
don't
I,
either. You'd know more than I
yeah,
would.
yeah, but it's like for my like surface level understanding is it's a game changer for everything, right? If you can actually do quantum computing and you can process things that efficiently, it's like I mean, what's the analogy? It's like being able to generate a password or something like that. You need like almost an infinite number of characters to actually produce a password that couldn't be cracked or hacked, right, by quantum computing. So yeah, I don't even know what to think about it, but that's
Well,
that's
I
it. It's
look at
very, very
AI
cool.
and the evolution of AI. I call it Moore's law times 100, right? I don't know exactly what Moore's law is, but it's that basic law that technology expands every 2 or 3 years, it doubles, whatever the computing technicality is. I look at AI and how much that's been expanding. Even look at 2024 and how many advancements we saw in models, different models, new tools, new platform systems, etc. I mean, it's crazy how fast this stuff is updating.
Yeah, so I was in academia in 2019, and we were doing some tests on like the very early GPT models, and they were horrendous. Like the content that it actually produced, and this was 2019.
3.5, yeah, and even
Yeah,
before that.
yeah, yeah. This is before 3.5, and it's like, yeah, yeah. For going, 5 years from that to now, it's like it's a whole other world, a whole other universe. Yeah, who knows what the next 5 years are going to look like? We're projecting 2025, but it's like we have no idea what things are actually going to be like.
Crazy. Well, this is the Marketing Quacks podcast after all, Matt, and I want to help you define a marketing quack in your world. So, what I mean by this, I guess, what are some marketing tricks and gimmicks that you see people do, whether it's in the startup space, it's in the AI agent space that you're working in? What are those gimmicks or tricks that you see people do that you don't like?
Yeah, I love this question. I watched a few of your other episodes and saw that you asked this one. It's a very good question. I thought quite a bit about it to see what value I could bring to it.
I
I
love
think
it.
one of the things that I notice, and it might just be I notice it because of my statistical background, but I'll see things all the time. Like I'll paint a picture, give you an example. So say you're a company that sells a vibrating belt to lose weight, right? And you do this trial and you say something like 100% more individuals lost weight in our trial with our vibrating belt than didn't, or that didn't. And then you go in and you actually look at that trial, and it's something like, this is totally hypothetical, I'm making this up, but without the belt, maybe 1 in 1,000 people lost weight, and then with the belt, maybe 2 in 1,000 people lost weight, right? So that is 100% increase, but it is entirely meaningless, that increase going from 1 to 2, right? So you see things and you catch things like that all the time. Just maybe it's just me because of my background, but that's one of the
Yeah, or
gimmicks.
the 99.99% effective, but yet they only surveyed 100 people, not thousands. You know what I mean? Like they want to convince people they surveyed millions of people and this product is so effective, things like that.
Yeah, yeah, and plots too, right? Where you change the scale of the axes and stuff like that. So you have two plots side by side, and you like the lay person will view those and be like, oh yeah, it's the same thing they're measuring, but it's totally different things that they're actually measuring. I think one of the being in this space that I'm in, this is very apparent with AI too. You can tell me if you think this is a gimmick or not, but like I think one of the most common things like is if in the description of what you do as a company, you see something like AI in the name or the tagline or something like that, and you're not building foundational models or doing like robotics or something like that, I do find that a little gimmicky, right? It's like
That's
you're
my
not
world,
really,
bro. There's so many gimmicky. I call them AI wrappers, white label open AI, where there's like thousands of these AI SaaS tools. They're claiming to be this all in one silver bullet AI solution. And it's like, guys, you spun up a fancy website with good marketing and fancy buttons and CRO. And all you're doing is pulling an API key from GPT 4.0 mini or whatever the cheapest model that you can find and charging someone 30, 40, $50 a month, hoping they don't understand it. And most people don't understand it, which is why it's such a unique business model right now. But that's going to evaporate, in my opinion, here at some point.
yeah, I feel like it already is to some degree. I mean, I get why people do it and have done it, right? Because it's the shiny new thing that you want to talk about and you want to add it to your tagline. But I think people are starting to see through it a little bit. At least maybe I hope they are to some degree.
Yeah, just learn ChatGPT, learn the basics, learn how to build a custom GPT, spend $20 a month on ChatGPT Plus, and that's all you need for most people. That's what I always tell people.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree entirely. Yeah, yeah, we barely scratch the surface of what we can do with these large language models.
Absolutely. Well, Matt, this has been fun. Any final notes on just advice that you have from building a startup, leaving corporate America, AI, anything that we talked about in this episode?
Um, I mean, if you're interested in the entrepreneurial journey, right? It's not for everybody. Let's be honest, right? It's tricky. It's challenging. I mean, there's a reason people want to work in corporate America. It's safe, comfortable environment. But if you are kind of scrappy, resourceful, you're hardworking, and you really want to produce value, I would encourage you to step into the entrepreneurial world because we all would benefit from that, right? Because oftentimes people like the value that they're providing and their potential is very limited in the corporate environment, and then like actually stepping out and being able to show what you're worth and things like that, right? We all as a society benefit. So I would encourage you to do that if you're thinking about it and you have those traits or skill sets.
I love it. What's the point of life without some risk, right? All the problems that we have in society have been solved by entrepreneurs in one way or another.
Yeah, yeah, and they will continue to you know that will continue hopefully unless AI takes over that task for us.
Absolutely. So, Matt, where can people find you online to learn more about the Jenny Project and what you're doing?
Yeah, so I am somewhat of a social media monk. Maybe that will change in the future here. But I'm on LinkedIn. Our company's on LinkedIn. We're going through a pretty big rebrand right now. So you'll see a lot of change depending on when if you check out our website or our LinkedIn profile, what you'll see there. But yeah, feel free to check us out on LinkedIn or
Cool.
myself on LinkedIn.
I'll leave all the links in the description below. Get you some nice little SEO juice with the backlinks and stuff too. So, Matt,
Yeah.
thank you again for joining this episode of the Marketing Quacks podcast, and thank you to everyone for listening. Be sure to tune in again for the next episode.
Thanks, Ryan.